So I'll tell you something funny that happened just a minute ago. At Smo, Justin's over here and he's playing, walk with me. Have I gone too far? He's over here playing the guitar and he's just doing an amazing job. And I'm just in the worship. Debbie and I are right here on the front row. We're just singing away. And it happens that the very end of his guitar, for some reason, catches the light. And down below here, it made this dark shadow and it's moving like this. I thought it was a mouse. I really did. And I thought, can you imagine if a mouse came through here? We would have, you talk about parting the Red Sea? I mean, you talk about a Holy Ghost revival. And Debbie said, and I would be the first one leading. I said, you'd be like Moses, right down the middle of them. I'm glad it wasn't a mouse, but you're also there. Great job. I love our worship team, don't you? Somebody give them a round of applause. They're so good. We're so blessed. Thank you, Rich, for your prayer and leading us today. So we're looking at Red Sea rules. One of the things I do not like, I'll just tell you, I got a problem. I just don't like sometimes learning life's lessons. Do you? I mean, sometimes we need to learn them, but sometimes they're hard and difficult, and it's a good thing we learn them, but dadgum, we don't like to go through them. I was thinking about some hard life lessons. Maybe this is one. I grew up in a large family, so this was a hard life lesson that I learned on the fly as I was coming along in my family. If your sister or brother hits you, don't hit him or her back. They always catch the second person. Do you ever believe that? I mean, it's true. Here's a family. It's kind of, hey, how many of you have to separate your kids like that? Anybody? Did anybody have to do that on the way to church today? Yeah. I mean, it happens. There's always the second one that gets caught. It's kind of like in sports. Here's the next one. You can't trust dogs to watch your food. You just can't, no matter how trustworthy your dogs may be. Look at this one. I mean, look how hard it is. I mean, they beg. Look at this next one. Who can not give this next dog some food? Show the next one. There you go. I mean, isn't that precious? Well, let me show you the one that I get to see. Debbie and I get to see all the time. There's Murphy, and let me tell you, his spiritual gift is begging. He's really good at it too. Yeah, that's a hard lesson. Here's another life lesson. It's frustrating when you know all the answers, but nobody bothers to ask you the questions. Don't look at anybody. You know somebody who knows all the answers, who always does, but it's like nobody will ask. I saw one life lesson, though, that I thought was actually pretty good. Probably a keeper, probably one we should learn or should know. And I wonder if you know who said this. It's actually a quote from somebody famous. Here's what it says. If you're going through hell, keep going. Have you ever heard that before? Really a good thought if you think about it. Anybody know who said that? Some of you do. Winston Churchill said that. And Winston Churchill understood what it was like leading through World War II. And so if you're going through it, he said, don't stop. Don't get stuck there. Keep moving. Keep going. That's a good life lesson for us. And it's part of the story that we're learning from the Israelites and the parting of the Red Sea. I just don't like life lessons. And the reason I think is because I'd rather learn those lessons the easy way, wouldn't you? It's like, okay, Lord, listen, I'm a pretty good learner. You can do this a lot easier, and I can get the same lesson. Could we manage it that way? It kind of reminded me of an old commercial. Some of us are old enough to remember that was on some time ago, and the slogan was "Pay me now or pay me later." Do you know that one? Remember that? Pay me now, pay me later. It was Fram oil filter is what they were advertising. This guy would come on and he would say, "You can either pay me now to fix your problem, or you can pay me later." It's funny. I tease Debbie about this. Sometimes if she hears a noise in the car, it doesn't sound like there's working right. We need to take it to the shop or something. And I'll say, okay, we'll take it tomorrow, whatever. And then I'll come home that night and I'll say, okay, we need to take your car. So, well, the noise stopped. And I'm like, okay, but Debbie, do you think the car fixed itself? I mean, that doesn't happen too often. Pay me now, pay me later. Those are good life lessons. Well, they can be hard to learn these lessons, especially when you're going through some kind of challenge in life, like a Red Sea challenge that we've been looking at for the last 6 weeks. When you're in a Red Sea challenge, here's my experience, and maybe it's your experience too. I'm not interested in a lesson. I just want to get it over with. Just get me out of this challenge, whether it is a relationship challenge, a financial challenge, a business decision challenge, whatever it may be, an illness, something we're walking through. Just get me out of it. I don't care in the moment to learn a lesson. But I'm wondering if that's wrong. I'm wondering if I need to rethink that, because a lot of life lessons come through hard situations. And that's what we discover here. Here's the question, though, that I ask of myself as I'm working on this message. Well, Jimmy, just how teachable are you? Are you open to being taught lessons by God through what you're going through in life? Are you still growing? Are you better because you've gone through some difficult struggle and you've come out on the other side? Or do you look back on it and say, man, that was just a waste of time. I shouldn't have gone through that. It wasn't worth it. I just wasted my time. So today, here's what's going to happen. We're going to look at rule number 9. And I think this is a rule that if we'll apply it, it's one of the good rules. We can actually learn something here, and it can help us. So I got to set up the scene for where we are in chapter 14 of Exodus. You know, this is the passage where Moses leads the Israelites through the Red Sea on dry ground. So last week, that's where he was. He stood up, held his hands up, and the sea parted, made walls of water on either side. They walked through on dry ground. Some 2 to 3 million Israelites walked through. They got on the other side, and Pharaoh's army pursued them, including Pharaoh himself. You remember this? And then God said, okay, now lift your hands again. He lifted his hands again, and the water crashed in on the Egyptians, and they died. That's where we were last week. So I want us to pick up with what happens next. It's in Exodus 14. We're just going to read verses 30 and 31. As we honor God's word, would you stand and read this out loud with me, please? It'll be up on the screen. That is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. So you might fill in those blanks if you like to do that. The words that go there are awe, A-W-E, and faith. So I might ask this question. So what's the point of all this struggle of going through the Red Sea and God placing them here on purpose and making them very anxious about what's going to happen? Are we going to be rescued or not? What's the purpose of it? I think Rule 9 gives us a hint. Here's Rule 9 of the Red Sea Rules. View your current crisis as a faith builder for the future. In other words, whatever you're going through right now, it is building your faith for what's going to happen next. I heard one pastor say that God is always preparing us for what is next. Even in a job, sometimes he's preparing us. You got a good job, but maybe there's something he's leading you to next. Here's what I think happened in our life. I think God, in my time in law, was preparing me for my time in ministry. I believe that. And so view your current crisis as a faith builder for what you'll face in the future. You know, for 430 years, the Israelites were under the pressure and the terror of Pharaoh and his army and leaders. 430 years. Now, they didn't live that long, but a lot of them lived a long time. That's a long time to be under that kind of a struggle. They were slaves. But now, here's what they're seeing. Literally, put yourself there. They're on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, the Red Sea on the other side, and they're seeing bodies float up on the seashore, dead bodies. It's over. The tyranny's done. All because God did something that none of them ever imagined to save them. So, how did it impact their faith? The question can be for us sometimes, what's the godly lesson here that we're to learn in this experience? So here's what I think God does with Red Sea challenges. I think what he does is he uses them first to grow our faith. just as Rule 9 says. He's using these challenges to strengthen us for what we might face down the road. I heard somebody say recently this. They said, it was a pastor and he was preaching. He was talking about our faith and the fact that we need to grow in our faith. And he asked a question. He said, is there a lid on your faith? Is there a lid on your faith? So in other words, has it got a cap? Is there a ceiling? Do you get to a point where you can't grow anymore? I mean, you think about putting like a lid on a plant or something like that. There's no room for it to grow. And then the question that follows that is, if so, who put the lid on there? And I think the answer to that is sometimes it's us. Sometimes when it comes to our faith, we're like, hey, listen, I got enough. I'm growing. And I feel like I've grown a lot in the last year, but hey, let's take a break. Let's just coast for a while. Let's just not grow intentionally anymore for a while. And I think we do that. Here's what happens too. I think that society and the world around us also puts a lid on our faith. I mean, that's what Satan wants to do. He wants to snuff it out by putting a lid on it so that the light inside can't penetrate outside of it. That's what he wants to do. Is there a lid on our faith? Because we were meant to grow in our faith from the very beginning. All of our life, we were meant to grow. Difficult times, challenges, are a great opportunity for us to grow in our faith. If we believe in God, and I believe you do, every challenge we face brings that opportunity. Here's why. Because I believe that God is always teaching us something. He is. He's always doing it. No matter what we're going through, no matter where we are, you may be in a really good space right now in your life. Let me tell you, God's still teaching you even there to be appreciative, to be thankful, to be glad for what you have, not to hold that in a position where you think you're better than others who are going through difficult times. He's always teaching us. He is. So, what was he trying to teach these folks in the Red Sea story? We read it, a little bit of it today in verse 31 when it said this. It said, because of this, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses, both of them. Some other translations say it like this. So the people feared the Lord and they believed in the Lord and Moses. It's a holy respect, this awe is. It's a deep reverence and honor and trust in God. It's building stronger faith in God by what he does. And so God is always teaching us. And here's the two things, I think, main things he tries to teach us. The first is this: he's teaching us who he is. I'm so glad he's doing that. I'm so glad that he has a plan for everybody on earth to understand who he is, including you and me. He's teaching us who he is. In Exodus 14, a little bit earlier from what we read today, he tells them that this story is going to teach the Israelites and others, the Egyptians, who he is. Here's what it says: my great glory will be displayed throughout Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and his charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. That's so good. They're going to know. They may not like it, but they're going to know. And I would have added a little parentheses there that says, and so will my children, the Israelites. They will know that I am the Lord. Learning about the nature and character of God builds our faith. That's really what began to build my faith and my walk with Christ. When Debbie and I started getting serious about learning the Bible and reading through the Bible, and as we did, we were just overwhelmed by God's love and his affection for his children, including you and me. And we literally came to love him back in a deeper way. He's always teaching us about who he is, and that's such a good thing. But there's another part of it. The second main point he's trying to teach us to grow our faith is this. He's trying to teach us about ourselves. We need to know more about ourselves. as we go through these struggles sometimes. He's teaching us how we might handle things in the future. If I go through a hard time and I've leaned in to God and I know that He was my strength and my source of hope through it, then the next time another challenge comes, I can look back on it and say, He was with me there. He led me through that. I know and can trust He's going to lead me through this. So what happens is I walk into the next struggle stronger than I did into the first struggle. That's good. He's teaching me about myself. I can, with His help, persevere here. And that's the question. I mean, are we growing? Are we going to persevere, or are we going to give up? He's teaching us about ourselves. Will we stay with Him until the end of our lives, or will we turn back? Will we keep serving Him, even though it's going to cost me something to do so? I have to give up some time with my family or some other things that I like to do in order to serve Him. How much, here's what He's teaching us ultimately, how much do I really love Him? How deep is my love for Him? And then He's asking this too. He's teaching us this. Are you becoming more like my Son, Jesus? Are you learning to love like He did, to forgive? Are you living a life that is modeled after His life? He's teaching us about ourselves, which is also a good thing, because in that He's building our faith in Him. Now, we know what faith is. We understand it. We have it. But here's a good definition of it. Faith is believing that what the Lord has said will be accomplished. Really simple. In other words, if He said it, we can believe it and trust it and depend on it. In the Red Sea Rules book that we've been using for this series, Robert Morgan defines faith like this. He says, faith is being fully persuaded that God has the power to do what He has promised. I love those two words, fully persuaded. Fully persuaded. I am convinced that God will do this and that I can trust Him in this. But go back to my life lessons. Here's what we like to say. Yeah, but Lord, couldn't you have done that an easier way? I mean, why did you have to ramp up my anxiety if your purpose was for me to learn this lesson, we could have figured out a much easier, less stressful way to do that. And here's the problem with that kind of statement, because I've made that statement. Here's the problem with that. The focus there is on me and my feelings and my desires. It makes me the center of the whole thing. That's not what the Israelites came away from with this Red Sea miracle. They came away with awe and respect and honor and faith, believing in God. He's always building our faith. You know, I love that in the New Testament we have all the examples of Paul's Red Sea challenges. I mean, he lists out those challenges for us. And there's one particular moment where he expresses his faith, I think, in a powerful way. It's when he's on his way to Rome and he's on a ship. You remember this story? And there's this violent storm that comes up. And it's interesting, the captain and all of the crew come to him to kind of, they know that he must have some kind of faith. And so they're going to him. And he speaks to them and he encourages them. And here's what happens in Acts 27, verse 23. He tells them, the crew and the passengers, he says, for last night, an angel of God came to me. And he said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. That was God's plan, that he would go to Rome and stand trial before Caesar. What's more, this angel said, God in His goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. In other words, all these people on this boat are going to be saved, even though they didn't deserve it. Kind of sounds like the story of Jesus saving us. But then look what Paul says. Paul says this. He says, this is Paul speaking. So take courage, for I believe it will be just as he said. Man, that is solid faith right there. That's the kind of faith that I want. I wonder, do you have that kind of faith? I want that. For I believe God. It will be just as He said. But there are days when I'm not there. Maybe there are days when you're not there either. And the question is, how can I get there? I want that. How can I get there? And so it reminded me of the story of Jesus when the father came to him and said, hey, my child is demon possessed. Can you save him? Can you deliver him? You remember this story? And Jesus asked him something like, do you believe that I can? And he said, that famous quote, he said, I do believe, but help my unbelief. And so I got this prayer that I think is good when we're trying to develop this kind of faith to pray. And this prayer is just simply this: Lord, increase my faith. Increase my faith. I've got this much faith, Lord, or sometimes it's maybe this much faith. Would you give me a little bit more, or maybe some more? Give me some more faith, Lord. Increase my faith. And God did. For the man, he will for us when we ask. For us, our faith is strengthened when we make reasonable and logical assumptions about God's care and control over us and based on his scriptural promises. What he's told us in the Bible, he will do. And so I like this little thought. We must choose to apply God's promises to today's problems we face and use that experience to trust him in tomorrow's problems. That's really good. So look at it again. We must choose to apply God's promises. I will be with you. I will see you through this. I will carry you. All of the promises of God. We apply those to today's promises and use that experience to trust him in the future. But if we keep a lid on our faith, if we're good with where we are in our faith right now, we'll never grow. And then here's what's going to happen. When the storms come, guess what? We're going to panic, and we're not going to handle it the way we could. So becoming stronger, doing this in our life, this is a lifelong process. It doesn't just happen. It's not a one-and-done deal. It's not the idea that when we were saved, God flipped some switch, and all of a sudden our faith is up at the top of the level. I mean, we're there. It's not that. It's a process. And sometimes we get it right. It's kind of one step forward, one step back. That's what happened to the Israelites. If you turn the page in the Bible from where we were reading together a minute ago, I don't even have to turn the page. It's on the same page, same section. In chapter 15, here's what we discover. They're going to need another lesson real quick over what God can do. Because they're in the wilderness now. He's told them, set out, start going. They're in the wilderness now, moving, and they come to a place where there's no water. Look at this. It's in chapter 15, verse 23. They came to this oasis called Mara. The water was too bitter to drink, so they called the place Mara. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. It's like, wait a minute, you just, 2 paragraphs back, you just had faith in Moses. They turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. And God, he answers again their prayer and provides water for them. It's just a couple of verses later. It says this: after leaving Mara, the Israelites traveled on to this oasis called Elim. And there they found 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They camped beside the water. God's so good. He's always growing our faith. He's always growing our faith. And God's good, and because he's good, here's the second part of what I believe he's teaching us with every Red Sea challenge. He's going to use it for our good no matter what. It may not seem good at the time, but God's going to use it in some way for good. And a lot of times we don't see it until we look back on what we've gone through and how God led us through it. And guess what? We can say it's good. I heard somebody say to me recently, after describing an incredible Red Sea challenge where financially they lost everything. And they were at rock bottom. And as I was talking to him about this, just in a casual conversation afterwards, you know what they said to me? With tears in their eyes, looked at me and said, but I wouldn't change what I went through for anything. I wouldn't change it. Because when I leaned into God, he needed me to be there so that I could learn who he is and I could trust him. and I wouldn't trade it for anything. If I had to choose it, I would choose it again. That's a good life lesson, a hard life lesson that cost him a lot. It's kind of what Paul says in 2 Corinthians when he shares a life lesson with us. Here's what he says. He says, we think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. We thought we would never live through it. In fact, we expected to die. But as a result, look at this, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned, there's a life lesson, to rely on God who raises the dead. When we face hardships and difficulties, God will use that to do a number of things, to develop our character, to deepen our faith, to build a positive growth in our lives, to draw us closer to Him. And I know sometimes that's hard to see, but we got to believe it, friends. We got to believe it. It's for our good. Robert Morgan in the book, he says this. He says, trials and troubles are dumbbells and treadmills for the soul. I love that idea. They develop strength and stamina. They're dumbbells and treadmills for the soul. For the soul. Building, strengthening the soul. James told us this, the brother of Jesus. He said, listen, when these troubles come your way, look at this in verse 2 of chapter 1. When troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity. It's an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete and needing nothing. So for me, here's the bottom line for me, and maybe for you. When we're going through and learning a hard, godly life lesson, for me, the end result, if the end result is that I have drawn closer to God through it, if I've just taken one step closer to Christ in it, then it was worth it. Just like that person told me yesterday. It's worth it. And I'd do it again. So, good life lessons for us. This week, here's some next steps for you to think about this week. Do you truly know and believe that God will use your current struggle to grow your faith? If so, that's a good thing. But you need to know it. You need to know that it's true. You need to ask, maybe as you're going through it, just do this, just ask, say, Lord, I know there's got to be a lesson here. I know that I'm not sure why I'm going through this, but I know that you have something to teach me here, so please make me teachable. Let me learn as I walk through this, trusting you. The second one is that beautiful prayer. I believe, but Lord, I need some help. Please help me. Help my unbelief. The third kind I'm claiming this week, I want the kind of faith that Paul had. I do. And so I'm gonna work on that this week. And then the last one is this. Listen, none of this is possible without a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I know sometimes you probably get tired of me offering this next step. But listen, if you haven't committed your life to Christ, then all of your Red Sea struggles are just you. And while God may be watching over you and helping you while you're not even aware of it, you need a relationship with Him. And so if you haven't done that, commit your life to Him today and just tell Him, I need you, Lord. I really need you. Well, I wanted to close this message today with a prayer that stood out to me years ago. I don't know if any of you remember, Peter Marshall was the chaplain for the U.S. Senate for a long time. Incredible man. And somewhere along the way, I came across a book of the prayers of Peter Marshall prayed over in the U.S. Senate over those years. And I read through those, and this one stood out. And I want to close with this for us today. So would you pray with me? The name of this prayer is simply, I need thee, Lord. I need thee, Lord. Let's pray. I do need you, Lord. I need you now. I know that I can do without many of the things that once I thought were necessities, but without you, I cannot live, and I dare not die. I needed you when sorrow came, when shadows were thrown across the threshold of my life, and you didn't fail me then. I needed you when sickness laid a clammy hand upon my family, and I cried out to you, and you heard me. I need you when I don't know how to turn, because you'll indicate the better way. I'm grateful for that constant sense of need that keeps me close to your side. Help me to keep my hand in yours and my ears open to the wisdom of your voice. Speak to me that I may hear you giving me courage for hard times and strength for difficult places, giving me the determination for challenging tasks. I don't ask you for the easy way, but just for your grace that's sufficient for every need, so that no matter how hard the way, how challenging the hour, how dark the sky, I may be enabled to overcome. In your strength, who has overcome the world, I make this prayer. Amen.